Today, I'm gonna cover one of the most frequently asked questions on my channel: how to hook up your multi-effects unit to your amp. What's up everybody, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Taylor and I do all sorts of guitar related stuff like this.
You made me blow up an amplifier!
On my channel. If that's something you enjoy, make sure to subscribe and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss any of my uploads. So it seems like I get comments all the time from people asking me how to hook up their multi-effects units to their amplifiers. So I decided to post a poll on YouTube and ask you guys directly if you were interested in a video where I cover that topic. And overwhelmingly you guys said yes. So thank you so much for your comments and your feedback. A lot of times that's how I get ideas for videos. So if you have a comment or you have something you want to see on my channel, definitely let me know below. So today what I wanted to do is take a multi-effects unit, plug it into my amp back here, and we'll go over a few of the different connection methods, and I'll just show you kind of what each one does and why or why not you would want to use each one. For the demonstration, we're going to be using my Pod Go, this guy. That Pod Go is so hot right now.
So hot right now.
Now, even though I'm using a Pod Go, this should help you understand how to hook up any multi-effects unit to your amplifier. And it'll also give you the idea of the limitations you might have if you don't have an effects loop on either your amplifier or your multi-effects unit. And the one thing I didn't go over in the demonstration is just hooking up your multi-effects unit directly to like your monitors or a PA or like an FR cabinet or something like that. When you go that route, you're not limited to what amps and what cabinets you can use, and you can pretty much get the full spectrum of whatever multi-effects processor that you're using. So what I cover in this video is going directly into the front of the amplifier, plugging into a power amp or the effects return on an amplifier, and also the 4-cable method. Okay, with all that said, let's get over to the demo. Okay guys, I have my Pod Go here plugged into the clean channel of my 5150. We're running the Pod Go in front of the amp, and here's the sound of the amp with everything on the Pod Go bypassed. By the way, I am playing my Jackson Kelly, which has an EMG-81 in the bridge and an EMG-85 in the neck. Most of the time when I get comments about hooking up modelers into amplifiers, I have a feeling what's going on is it's people using multi-effects units, whether it's the Pod Go or the GE200 or the Ampero or whatever, and they're plugging them into the front of combo amps. Now there's nothing wrong with doing that, and you have a bunch of different effects options in here to use in front of an amplifier, but if you're trying to use the amp modeling, that's gonna produce some pretty undesirable results. Let me turn on both the amp and the cabinet modeling and show you what that sounds like. So like you can see, it really doesn't sound that good, and the reason is we're already using a preamp with the amplifier, and we're already using a speaker cabinet as well. So let's bypass the speaker emulation, and I'll show you what that sounds like. Like you can see, it sounds much better, but it sounds really tinny and thin, and there's also some other sort of weird effects happening there, and it's because we're running the emulation of an amplifier's preamp into an actual amplifier's preamp and into a cabinet, so it's a little weird. But let's bypass the amp and let's throw a distortion in our signal chain and see what that sounds like. Okay, this is the line 6 distortion in the Pod Go. Okay, I don't know if it sounds better to you, but to me that sounds much better than trying to use the preamp section of an amplifier, but it's a little bit noisy. So let's throw a noise gate in the chain so we can cut back on some of that noise. This is typically how I set up my noise gate. I always set my threshold to around -40 to -35 dB, and I turn the decay all the way down so that way it's nice and snappy. And now, no more fizz. You can also use your multi-effects unit to run whatever effects you want in front of your amplifier. This is just a couple of examples, but I wanted to give you guys an idea in case you're hooking up your multi-effects unit in front of your amp, especially if it's like a combo amp and it doesn't have an effects return. There are options and there are a bunch of different things you can do with it. Unfortunately, if you're hooking up this way though, you probably want to skip using the amp and cabinet emulation that's built in. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna plug into the effects loop return on this amplifier, and what that's gonna do is it's gonna bypass the preamp section of my 5150, and we'll only be using the power tube section. Let's do that real quick. Okay, now we're hooked up into the effects loop return, and this is what it sounds like with that same patch we have set up. Like you can hear, it is much, much darker, and you definitely need to compensate for that by either using, a preamp or, an EQ or something like that. But the cool thing about hooking up this way is that you can actually use the amp emulation that is built into your multi-effects unit. So let's bypass this distortion and let's turn on the amp. Now, if you're using power tubes like I am and your multi-effects unit allows it, you'll probably want to bypass the power amp emulation inside of your multi-effects unit. If you're using a solid state amp, it probably doesn't matter so much. And if your multi-effects unit doesn't allow you to bypass the power amp tubes, you'll probably be okay too. But personally, for my preference, if I'm using actual power tubes, I want to bypass the power tube amp emulation inside the PodGo. And to do that inside the PodGo, what you do here is you go into the amp and you select the preamp mode. And we'll select the same amp from the preamp mode here. Rev Ren. Okay, so here's the Rev preamp in the PodGo running directly into the effects loop return on my 5150. Like you can tell, much, much better, and this is definitely my preferred way to hook up any sort of amp modeler. Whether you are running just directly into a power amp or you're running into the effects loop return of an amplifier, I think this is definitely the way to go if you want to use the amp modeling inside your multi-effects unit. Okay, the last thing we're going to do here is the 4-cable method. So let me hook this up real quick and then I'll go through it and explain why you would do this and give you some examples. Okay, so now we're hooked up with the 4-cable method, and in order to use the 4-cable method, you're going to need an effects loop in your multi-effects unit as well as your amplifier. The reason you would want to use the 4-cable method is if you have an amp head like this one that you really like the tone on and you want to use, but you want to be able to use your multi-effects unit and you want to be able to put the effects both before the preamp section and after the amp. The way you hook up with the 4-cable method is you go from the output of the guitar to the input of your multi-effects unit, from the effects send from your multi-effects unit into the input of the amp, from the amp effects loop send from your amplifier into the effects return of your multi-effects unit, and then from the output of your multi-effects unit into the amp effects loop return on your amplifier. And if it seems really complicated, it's not, but essentially what you're doing here is you're inserting your actual amp into your effects chain wherever your send return block is. So on the PodGo, I have it sitting right next to my amp, which is bypassed in the effects chain. So here's everything bypassed on the pod and just using my amp. But let's say we want to throw a boost before our amp. We can go into the PodGo here and we'll add in a tube screamer. Turn the drive down on that, turn the output all the way up. And the same thing applies if you want to add effects that you would normally add at the end of your signal chain after your amplifier, like reverbs or something like that. Let's throw a reverb on this guy and we'll show you what that sounds like. Let's do something cool. Okay, there you have it. Those are the 3 main different ways to hook up your multi-effects unit in conjunction with an actual amplifier. Now, I want to stress again that if you have a multi-effects unit and you really want to use the amp and cab emulation built in it, but you want to be able to play through an actual speaker, you could use flat response speakers like studio monitors or even plugging into a PA. Those should all be flat response speakers, as well as FR cabinets, which are essentially powered speakers that have a totally flat response, allowing you to use the cab emulation that you have built into your multi-effects unit. Alright guys, hopefully this video helped answer some of the questions that you guys have been asking me, and also helped you understand why you may or may not want to hook up your multi-effects unit a certain way in conjunction with your amplifier. If there's anything that I missed, or anything that you want clarified, let me know down in the comments below, and I will do my best to get back to all of those comments. As always, thank you so much to my patrons for helping support the channel. If you're interested in joining my Patreon account, there's a link for that in the description below. And if you like this video, make sure to hit the like button, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys.